Good morning, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed your break. I know I did. I hope that you've taken the week to look at what you might be writing about for your research paper and that you've sent me an email, hint, hint, so that I can address the topic with you. We can narrow it down in scope. We can make sure you're on the right track. Please continue to look at and review and utilize all of the materials that I have placed behind the syllabus link, and that is on Blackboard for your course. There is also a completed paper. I keep saying this. If somebody gives me a paper that does not follow that outline, then I'm going to know that not only have you not paid attention to anything we've done, but you've not reviewed anything afterwards. This is to help you. Please utilize these materials, okay? I'm trying to help you get an A in the course. One of the key things we're going to be looking at with the paper is that you follow the outline in the completed paper. It's also on the rubric. So think about those topics. Come on, get those emails in. I'm not getting anywhere near the number of emails that I should. And I know that you're all going to wait till the last minute and then say, I sent you an email yesterday, you didn't get back to me. Well, that's because I've got 135 people sending me an email at the same time. So don't do that to me. Don't do it to yourself. Get me an email in as soon as you can, okay? I want you all to get a good grade on the paper and in the course. Okay, this week we're going to talk about chapters 13 and 14. If you look on page 423, chapter 13 starts out with the gist of power and leadership. How leaders use power, why power is important, the key effects of power in the workplace, and why they're so important. And if you look at the function of dependence, there is no power without dependence. And think about it. Usually someone holds power over you because you are dependent on them. I mean, you did it when you were little. You were kids. Your babies are dependent on their parents. There's a power dependency there. Same thing in the organization. We are dependent on our supervisors, our superiors, management, the key figures in the company to do what is necessary for us to thrive, to keep our jobs, to stay ahead of the game, to do what we need to do. So we are dependent on our organization. That's why the people in our organization have power over us. So we're going to talk about power and dependence. If you turn to 424 and 425, I love to talk about these. These are all the different types of power. So it's not just about power, it's what power does for you. Why do we give people power? So we'll look at the different types. Coercive, reward, expert power, all those kinds of things make a difference. The chapter also talks about which power is the most and least effective, and that's something you have to think about too. It also brings up the key role of dependence on 426 and 427, and also this is an interesting aspect. If you look on page 427, non-substitutability. In other words, the power is there because you can't replace what that person can give you with someone else. That's a key tool too for power. Power tactics on 428, how to use them. Applying power tactics, how power affects people on 430 and 431. Sexual harassment, of course, in the workplace on 432. A definition of organizational politics on 433. Notice on 434 the importance of organizational politics. The OB poll, 51% of employees got ahead because of politics. You've heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's what they're talking about. The factors that influence political behavior are on page 436 in Exhibit 13.3, but they're explained in those last few pages. The zero-sum approach on 438. This is an important concept. We're going to talk about this in the class. you'll be hearing this on the recording, and why it's important in power and keeping people in positions of power in power. Impression management on 441, but also defensive behaviors. Look at Exhibit 13.5 and review those. You will find that you'll see a lot of those more often than you realize in your organization. Impression management techniques on 442. Review those as well. You'll see that those are a key indicator of a lot of situations that you see in the workplace, and you don't realize how power is in play there. That's pretty much all for Chapter 13. Let's look at Chapter 14. If we're going to talk about power, and this is why I like to have these two chapters together, there's going to be conflict. With conflict comes negotiation if you want to resolve the conflict. And that's what's key about conflict, is being able to negotiate. So let's start on page 459, a definition of conflict. What is conflict? We're going to talk about that. Notice the key word in the definition, though, is perception. I must perceive or have a feeling that you are trying to take something from me, hence the conflict. So if there's no perception of that going on, makes sense, right? There is no conflict. There's functional and dysfunctional conflict. What's important to remember about these is that conflict can be good. It's gotten a negative rap, so to speak. There's a negative connotation with conflict, but there's functional conflict and there's dysfunctional. And there's also 3 different types of conflict, which we'll talk about. And those are on the bottom of 459. I'm not getting too much into the loci of conflict, which is the locus or the framework. We might touch on them a little bit, but they're pretty basic. Conflict between 2 individuals, conflict between 2 groups, and conflict between members of a group. That's all those mean. So those are pretty, I hate when textbooks get you hung up on these words that you go, what's a loci? Oh, that's more than one locus. Okay, I got it now. I like to talk turkey. I think you figured that out by now. The conflict process. This starts on 462 and goes ad nauseum. It goes through a number of pages. Just look at Exhibit 14.2, the conflict process. That gives all those pages in a nutshell. To make it real easy, short, and sweet to understand, there's 5 stages of conflict. And look at that on 463. In talking about all these stages, there is one section, a couple of things. On 464, perceived and felt conflict. Remember I talked about perception in the beginning. If somebody perceives or thinks that somebody's trying to take something from them, there's a perception of conflict. But it hasn't happened yet. Once they take it from you, now it's felt. So you lose that job. Something else happens. You don't get that promotion. They give it to someone else. You thought this was coming. You had a perception. You had a feeling. Well, now it's happened. So that's the difference between perceived conflict and felt conflict, and we'll talk about that. Also, intentions. There's different dimensions of handling conflict, and these are intentions. If you look at Exhibit 14.3, you'll see those, and they're also listed on page 465, right underneath that exhibit. We're going to be talking about those. Conflict management techniques are on page 467. These are in Exhibit 14.5, so you want to review those. We're going to talk about those. And a key way to resolve conflicts is on 469, negotiation. Remember that with negotiation, nobody gets 100% of what they wanted. That doesn't mean it's bad. What it means is that people are willing to give up a little bit to get a lot, and it's okay. Nobody needs to have 100% of what they want. When you start getting into that realm of conflict resolution, now you're getting into a win-lose situation. The purpose of negotiation is to have a win-win situation. So each party has something they can live with. It's not 100% of what they wanted, but they're closer than they were when they started. That's what's key. That's what's going to help you to resolve a conflict. So that's negotiation. Remember back in chapter 13, I talked about the zero-sum approach, and to pay attention to that. If you look on page 470, you'll see the fixed pie. It's the same concept. The two of them mean the same thing. In other words, there isn't enough for everybody, so I better fight to make sure I get my piece of the pie. And if you think about a pie, there's only so many pieces, right? That's how the whole concept started. Because the whole mindset behind it is, well, there's only so many pieces in a pie. And after those pieces are gone, somebody has to go without having pie. So same thing with conflict resolution. Okay. So we'll talk about those. The negotiation process, there's 5 steps to it, and they're listed on 473. We'll talk about those not in a whole lot of detail, but if you look on 474, Exhibit 14.8, you'll see the negotiation, and the steps are laid out there. Let's see. Something interesting too, there are differences when negotiating in cultures and in gender, and these concepts are on page 478 and 479. Now my research for my dissertation was conducted on women that were in leadership positions in the banking industry, and the effects of self-efficacy, which means your ability to perceive. Remember, perception is a big thing. When they say perception is reality, that's what they're talking about. But I looked at these leaders, these female leaders, to see if how they felt about themselves, if they thought they were capable, in other words, of being good leaders, if that made a difference in their effectiveness as leaders. So I'm always interested in things like on page 479. Men do ask more for things than women. We hesitate. We hold back. Not all of us. Some of you out there may not do this, and that's great because you're a step ahead of the game. But even when you do, there's negotiation involved. You're not going to get 100% of what you want. You have to step back a bit and say, baby steps, I'm getting a little bit. I'm not getting everything, but I'm getting something. It's all good. Those are the kinds of things you're looking at. So the whole stereotype that they talk about is that women are more cooperative and pleasant in negotiations. So we don't go for the jugular. Not that you should anyway, but the point is we're not as assertive. We're always concerned about how people will feel about us instead of getting what needs to be resolved. And a lot of times that kind of holds us back. So if you look at the OB poll on page 479, you'll kind of see what they're talking about. Third-party negotiations are important too. If you look on 481, we're going to talk about mediators and arbitrators and the differences, and a conciliator. That's on page 482. I love the example of the Godfather film. Really? Okay, let's negotiate, right? All right, that's chapters 13 and 14. The match games are out there. Please upload them as you have been. Please answer your questions for the chapters with citations. I will continue to take points if you don't do that. Remember, I'm prepping you for the paper. I'm not trying to punish you. Some people are still doing the APA citations incorrectly. If you learn anything from this class, I want you to learn how to write, articulate, comprehend, take care of the things you will need to do. This is not just about a paper in this class. This is about you writing an email to your boss, writing a memo to your subordinates, writing a proposal at a job for something that you want to bring into play at work. That's what all this is about. Okay? So please remember, I'm looking at the bottom line for you guys. Please work with me. Get me those emails in. Get your assignments in on time. The third and final exam will be coming more quickly than you realize. Continue to take your notes for that one page you're going to have. The paper's due the week before the final, so I want to keep you up to speed on everything that you need to do. And as always, please let me know if you have any questions. But remember, if you ask me a question that is written down somewhere, I'm going to tell you, go read it. Go find it, okay? And that's to make sure that you read the materials that I've given you, because those are 90% of what you need to help you get the information that you need for the course, okay? I will talk to you guys later. You take care. I love you all. We'll see ya. Bye.